The sun was just beginning to set over the quiet suburban neighborhood, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. An elderly man, his back slightly hunched from years of carrying both the weight of service and time, walked slowly down the sidewalk. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from age, a reminder of the many years he had lived. He wore a simple cap with a faded military insignia, a small but proud symbol of his past. The man had served his country decades ago, back when his body was strong and his spirit unbroken. Now, in his later years, he found comfort in the small routines of life, a morning coffee, an afternoon stroll, the occasional chat with a neighbor. Today was no different. Or at least, it wasn't supposed to be. As he turned the corner, he noticed a police cruiser parked near the curb. Two officers stood beside it, their eyes scanning the street. The old man paid them no mind. He had lived a life of discipline and respect for authority. He had no reason to fear them. But as he passed by, one of the officers called out to him. "Hey, old-timer, hold up a second." The voice wasn't unkind, but there was an edge to it, a tone that suggested this wasn't just a friendly greeting. The old man stopped and turned, his face calm but his eyes sharp. He had faced far worse in his life than a couple of cops on a quiet street. The officers approached him, their boots clicking against the pavement. The taller one, a man with a clean-shaven face and a stern expression, looked him up and down. "You live around here?" he asked. The old man nodded. "Just a few blocks away. Been here for 20 years. His voice was steady, but there was a quiet strength behind it. The second officer, younger and with a less patient demeanor, folded his arms. "Mind if we check your bag?" He gestured to the small cloth bag the old man carried, the one he used to bring home his groceries. The old man hesitated. He wasn't carrying anything illegal, just some bread, a few vegetables, and a newspaper. But the request felt unnecessary, intrusive even. Still, he had nothing to hide. He handed over the bag. The younger officer took it and began rifling through it, his movements quick and rough. The old man watched, his jaw tightening slightly. He had spent his life following rules, respecting authority, but this felt different. This felt like disrespect. The taller officer studied the old man's face. "You seem nervous," he remarked. The old man met his gaze. "Not nervous. Just wondering why you're stopping an old man on his way home." The younger officer snorted, pulling out the newspaper. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area. Gotta check everyone." The old man almost laughed. Suspicious activity? Him? A man who could barely walk without his knees aching? But he kept his thoughts to himself. Arguing wouldn't help. The officers finished their search, finding nothing, of course. But instead of apologizing or letting him go, the younger one leaned in. "You got any ID on you?" The old man reached into his pocket, pulling out a worn leather wallet. He handed over his driver's license. The officer took it, glancing at it before passing it to his partner. The taller officer's eyebrows rose slightly. "Says here you're a veteran." The old man nodded. "Served 30 years. Retired as a sergeant major." There was a brief pause. The officers exchanged a look. For a moment, the old man thought maybe they'd show some respect now. But the younger one just smirked. "Yeah, well, that doesn't mean you get special treatment." The old man's patience was wearing thin. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking to be left alone so I can go home." The taller officer handed back the license, but his tone was colder now. "We'll decide when you can go." The old man took a slow breath. He had faced enemies in combat, men with guns and hatred in their eyes. But this, being treated like a criminal in his own neighborhood, this was something else entirely. Little did these officers know, their day was about to take a turn they would never forget. Because this old man wasn't just any veteran. He was the father of someone far more dangerous than they could imagine. And that someone was on his way. The old man stood still, his hands now clasped behind his back, an old habit from his military days. He wasn't afraid, but he could feel the tension in the air thickening. The younger officer had taken a step closer, his posture aggressive, as if trying to intimidate him. The taller one kept glancing around, as if expecting trouble. "You got any weapons on you?" the younger officer asked, his voice sharp. The old man almost smiled. "Son, if I had a weapon, you'd know." His tone wasn't threatening, just matter of fact. He had spent enough time around firearms to know how to handle them, and how to recognize when someone was trying to provoke him. The younger officer didn't like that answer. His face tightened. "You think this is a joke?" Before the old man could respond, the taller officer cut in. "Let's just keep this simple. We're going to pat you down. Standard procedure." The old man sighed but didn't resist. He knew arguing would only make things worse. He raised his arms slightly, letting them do their search. The younger officer's hands were rough, almost careless, as if he was more interested in making a point than actually checking for anything. A few neighbors had started to notice. Curtains twitched in windows. A woman walking her dog slowed down, watching with concern. The old man caught her eye and gave a small shake of his head, a silent message not to get involved. He didn't want this to escalate. The pat-down turned up nothing, of course. The old man wasn't carrying anything illegal. But instead of letting him go, the younger officer stepped back and crossed his arms. "We're going to need you to come down to the station for questioning." The old man frowned. "On what grounds?" "Obstruction," the officer said quickly. Now the old man knew this had gone too far. Obstruction? He hadn't done anything but walk home. He had cooperated, answered their questions, even let them search his bag and pat him down. This wasn't about safety or procedure anymore. This was about power. The taller officer must have seen the change in his expression because he held up a hand. "Look, it's just routine. We'll clear this up fast, and you'll be on your way." The old man's voice was calm but firm. "No. I'm going home." The younger officer's face flushed. "You don't get to decide that." Just as he reached for his cuffs, a deep voice cut through the air. "Problem here?" All three men turned. A figure stood a few feet away, tall, broad-shouldered, with a stillness that spoke of controlled strength. He wasn't in uniform, just jeans and a plain black jacket, but something about him radiated authority. His eyes, sharp and assessing, locked onto the officers. The old man's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He knew who this was. The taller officer hesitated. "This is police business. Step back." The man didn't move. "I asked if there was a problem." His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. The younger officer, still bristling, took a step forward. "This man is being detained. You need to back off unless you want to join him." A slow, dangerous smile touched the stranger's lips. "Detained for what?" The officers exchanged glances. They didn't have a real answer. The taller one tried to sound official. "We had reasonable suspicion." He matched a description. The stranger's gaze shifted to the old man. "You okay?" The old man nodded. "Just trying to get home." The stranger turned back to the officers. "Then I suggest you let him." Something in his tone made the taller officer pause. He studied the stranger's face, then his stance, and something clicked. His posture shifted slightly, less aggressive, more cautious. "You military?" The stranger didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket. Both officers tensed, but all he pulled out was a phone. He tapped the screen a few times, then held it up. "You recognize this number?" The taller officer leaned in, then stiffened. It was a direct line to the police chief. Before either officer could react, the stranger spoke again, his voice low. "I'm going to walk this man home now. If you have any real reason to stop him, call your supervisor. Otherwise, this ends here." There was a long silence. The younger officer looked like he wanted to argue, but the taller one put a hand on his arm. "Let it go." The stranger didn't wait for further discussion. He stepped forward, gently taking the old man's arm. "Come on, Dad." The officers froze. "Dad?" The old man allowed himself to be guided away, but not before giving the younger officer one last look. Not angry. Not even resentful. Just disappointed. As they walked, the stranger kept his voice low. "You want me to handle this?" The old man shook his head. "No. It's over." Behind them, the officers were still standing there, watching. The younger one was muttering something, but the taller one was staring at the stranger's back with dawning realization. Because he had just recognized him. And he knew exactly who they had just messed with. The two men walked in silence for a while, putting distance between themselves and the officers. The neighborhood was quiet now, the only sound the crunch of leaves under their feet. The old man finally let out a slow breath, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "You didn't have to come," he said, glancing at his son. The younger man kept his eyes forward, his jaw tight. "Yeah, I did." There was no anger in his voice, just a quiet certainty. The kind that came from years of making hard decisions and standing by them. The old man knew that tone well. He had used it himself many times. A few more steps, then the son spoke again. "They give you any real reason for stopping you?" The old man shook his head. "Just suspicious activity." A muscle twitched in the son's jaw, but he didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The old man could read him like a book. They reached the house, a modest, well-kept home with a small porch and a flagpole out front. The old man fished out his keys, but his hands were still a little unsteady. His son noticed. Without a word, he took the keys and unlocked the door. Inside, the house was neat but lived in. Photos lined the walls, military graduations, deployments, family gatherings. A lifetime of service and sacrifice. The son moved through the space like he knew every inch of it, which he did. This had been his home too, once. The old man sank into his favorite chair with a tired sigh. His son disappeared into the kitchen and came back with 2 glasses of water. He handed one over, then leaned against the wall, studying his father. "You should report them." The old man took a sip, then shook his head. "Won't change anything." "Maybe not. But it's not just about you." The old man knew what he meant. How many others had those officers stopped for no good reason? How many more would they hassle if no one spoke up? But he was tired. Tired of fighting, tired of making waves. Before he could answer, his son's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and his expression darkened. The old man raised an eyebrow. "Trouble?" The son slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Nothing I can't handle." But the old man knew better. That look meant something was brewing. And when his son said he could handle it, it usually meant someone was about to learn a very hard lesson. Outside, a car door slammed. Then another. The son didn't move, but his posture shifted slightly, ready but relaxed. The old man recognized it. Combat stance. A knock at the door. Firm. Official. The son pushed off the wall. "Stay here." The old man almost laughed. "My house, my rules." He stood, ignoring the ache in his knees, and walked to the door. 2 men in suits stood on the porch. Behind them, the same 2 officers from earlier, looking uneasy. One of the suits held up a badge. FBI. We'd like to ask you a few questions. The old man crossed his arms. About what? The suit's eyes flicked past him to where his son stood in the shadows. About your son's involvement in an incident earlier today. The old man didn't blink. What incident? The younger officer stepped forward, his face red. He threatened us. Interfered with police business. The old man just stared at him. Then, slowly, he turned to his son. That true? The son stepped into the light, his face calm. No. The suit cleared his throat. Sir, we have body cam footage. Good, the son cut in. Then you'll see I didn't threaten anyone. I just asked why my father was being detained. The other suit spoke for the first time. Your father wasn't detained. He was being questioned as part of an ongoing investigation. The son's smile was razor thin. Funny. He wasn't read his rights. Wasn't told he was part of any investigation. And last I checked, walking while old isn't a crime. The suits exchanged glances. This wasn't going how they'd planned. The old man watched, impressed despite himself. His son had always been good at this, cutting through the nonsense, holding people accountable for their words. It was one of the reasons he'd risen so high in the ranks. The first suit tried again. Look, we're just trying to get the facts. No, the son said, his voice quiet but final. You're trying to intimidate an old man and cover for two cops who overstepped. It stops now. Silence. Then, from the back, the taller officer muttered, "This is bullshit." The son's eyes locked onto him. You want to say that again? The officer swallowed but didn't repeat it. The suits realized they were losing control of the situation. One reached for his radio. We might need backup. The son's phone rang. He answered without looking away from them. Yeah. A pause. Then he held the phone out to the lead suit. For you. The man hesitated, then took it. Hello? Whatever was said on the other end made his face go pale. He handed the phone back like it was burning his fingers. The son pocketed it. We done here? The suits nodded quickly. The officers looked confused, then furious as they were waved off by the FBI. As the cars pulled away, the old man shut the door and turned to his son. What was that about? The son shrugged. Called in a favor. The old man shook his head, but there was pride in his eyes. You always did know people. The son grinned, just for a second. Then it faded. This isn't over. They'll try to spin this, make it about me being some hotshot throwing weight around. The old man nodded. He'd seen it before. What are you going to do? The son looked out the window, his expression unreadable. What I should have done a long time ago. The old man watched his son pace the living room like a caged tiger. Every few steps, the younger man would glance at his phone, then resume his measured stride. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. You're going to wear a hole in my floor, the old man remarked, sipping his coffee. His son paused, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. They're stalling. The chief's office claims they need more time to review the body cam footage. The old man set his mug down with a quiet clink. Means they're scrambling to cover their asses. A grim nod. Exactly. Outside, the neighborhood had settled into evening quiet. Streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the walls. The son stopped by the window, staring at nothing. You know this won't end with an apology, the old man said quietly. I know. The response came quick and hard. But it ends with them understanding. The phone buzzed again. This time, the son answered immediately. Talk to me. The old man watched as his son's posture went rigid. Every muscle tensed like a coiled spring. When? A pause. No, I'll handle it myself. He ended the call and turned, eyes burning with cold fury. They leaked the footage. Local news is running it as Delta Force commander interferes with police investigation. The old man's stomach dropped. They're making you look like the aggressor. Worse. The son grabbed his jacket from the chair. They edited out the entire first half where they harassed you. Just shows me threatening officers. A knock at the door made them both freeze. This time, it wasn't official. 3 sharp raps, then 2 soft ones. A pattern the old man didn't recognize, but his son did. The younger man moved swiftly, checking the peephole before yanking the door open. A woman stood there, late 30s with sharp green eyes and a no-nonsense ponytail. She carried a laptop bag slung over one shoulder. "Took you long enough," she said, brushing past him. The old man raised an eyebrow as the stranger made herself at home at his kitchen table, flipping open her laptop. "Dad," his son said, "this is Captain Alvarez." JAG Corps. Alvarez didn't look up from her typing. Retired JAG. Now I make bureaucrats cry for fun. She spun the laptop around. Take a look at what just hit social media. The screen showed a grainy cell phone video, the entire encounter from a neighbor's window. Clear as day, it showed the officers stopping the old man, the invasive search, the escalating tension. The old man exhaled sharply. "Well, I'll be damned." Alvarez smirked. Original bodycam footage got accidentally deleted from police servers. Good thing eyewitness videos can't be scrubbed. She tapped a key. This is going viral in real time. The son studied the screen, then Alvarez. "Who sent you? Does it matter?" She met his gaze. "What matters is we have about 20 minutes before the department tries to spin this another way. You want to control the narrative or not?" The old man watched as his son and the lawyer exchanged a silent conversation. Years of military service had taught him that look, the moment before a mission launch. "Do it," the son said. Alvarez was already typing furiously. "I need you on camera in 15. No uniform, no medals. Just a son defending his father." The old man reached out, gripping his son's arm. "You sure about this?" For the first time all evening, the younger man's expression softened. "Some things are worth the fight, Dad." Alvarez's phone chimed. She glanced at it, then cursed under her breath. "They just issued a statement calling for your suspension pending investigation." The son barked out a laugh. "Of course they did." The old man felt anger rise in his chest like molten lead. "After everything you've given." "Doesn't matter," his son cut in. "This was never about me." He turned to Alvarez. "Set up the live stream. Now." As Alvarez worked, the old man noticed 2 more figures approaching the house, a broad-shouldered man in a leather jacket and a younger woman with a professional camera setup. They nodded at the son like old comrades. The lawyer didn't look up from her laptop. "Your team's here." The son met his father's eyes. Last chance to back out. The old man straightened his spine, feeling decades younger. "Son, I faced down the Viet Cong with less firepower than this. Let's give them hell." Alvarez hit a final key with flourish. "We're live in 5, 4. The camera light blinked red. And the war for the truth began. The camera's red light burned like a laser sight. The son stood in front of it, not as a soldier but as a man, just a son whose father had been wronged. The old man sat slightly behind him, his military posture unconsciously straightening as the live stream counter showed viewers flooding in by the thousands. Alvarez held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. "You know who I am," the son began, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of controlled fury. "But tonight, I'm not here as a commander. I'm here as a son. He stepped aside, revealing the old man. This is my father. 30 years of service. 2 tours overseas. And today, he was treated like a criminal for walking home with groceries. The camera zoomed in on the old man's hands, still slightly trembling, the knuckles swollen with arthritis. A close-up that spoke louder than words. On the laptop screen, comments exploded. My grandpa got the same treatment last month. Where's the full body cam footage? Thank you for speaking up. The son continued, holding up a flash drive. This contains unedited witness footage from 3 different angles. It shows everything the police don't want you to see. He inserted it into Alvarez's laptop. Streaming it now. The screen split, on one side, the edited police version showing just the son's confrontation. On the other, the raw footage of the officer's harassment. The difference was damning. Alvarez muted their mic briefly. National news just picked up the stream, she whispered. We're at 500,000 viewers. The old man watched his son's profile, the tight jaw, the fire in his eyes. He recognized that look from when the boy was just 10 years old, standing up to schoolyard bullies. Some things never changed. The son unmuted. To the officers involved, you picked the wrong old man to harass today. A pause that made the air hum with tension. But this isn't just about my father. How many others have you done this to? How many didn't have someone to stand up for them? Off camera, the old man saw Alvarez's eyes widen at something on her screen. She scribbled on a notepad and slid it over, Chief on line 2. The son glanced at it, then deliberately turned back to the camera. We're taking questions now. The first one popped up highlighted. Why didn't your father just comply if he had nothing to hide? The old man surprised himself by leaning forward. Sonny, when you fought for the flag they wear on their uniforms, being treated like a criminal by it cuts deep. His voice cracked just enough. I'd have taken a bullet for this country. Was asking for dignity too much? The chat erupted. Alvarez suddenly muted them again. Chief's panicking. Says he'll release the full body cam footage and suspend the officers if you end the stream now. The son's smile could have frozen hell. Tell him we stop when the world sees the truth, all of it. A notification flashed, the White House is now watching your stream. The old man felt the ground shift under him. This had gone far beyond a neighborhood dispute. His living room had become a battlefield, and truth was their weapon. The son took a breath, his next words measured. To every good cop out there, and I know most of you are, this isn't about you. It's about holding the badge to the standard it deserves. He turned slightly. Dad? The old man understood. He reached into his shirt pocket and removed his faded military ID, holding it up to the camera. The dates confirmed his service during some of America's darkest hours. The chat went silent for 3 full seconds, then exploded in a storm of American flags and saluting emojis. Alvarez mouthed 1 million viewers just as the son dropped the hammer. We'll be at police headquarters tomorrow at 9 a.m. The public deserves answers. The media's invited. And Chief? He looked directly into the camera. Bring your best lawyers. The stream ended with half the internet already sharing it. As the team packed up, the old man noticed his hands weren't shaking anymore. He met his son's gaze. You realize they'll come at you twice as hard now. The son squeezed his shoulder. Let them try. Outside, news vans were already gathering. The battle was won. But the war was just beginning. The morning sun hadn't yet burned off the chill when the old man stepped onto his porch. His breath fogged in the crisp air as he surveyed the scene, news vans lining the street, reporters doing live stand-ups on his lawn, and a growing crowd of neighbors holding handmade signs that read "Honor our vets and justice for heroes." His son emerged behind him, now dressed in a pressed shirt under his leather jacket, civilian but unmistakably military in his bearing. "Sleep at all?" he asked, handing his father a steaming mug. The old man accepted it with a grateful nod. Enough. The truth was he'd lain awake remembering other battles, other times he'd stood against injustice. This felt different though. This time, the world was watching. A black SUV pulled up, and Alvarez stepped out, followed by two men in suits who moved like they knew how to handle trouble. She bounded up the steps, her eyes alight with victory. "You two are trending in 12 countries. The police union's scrambling, they just put out a statement condemning the officer's actions." The son sipped his coffee, unfazed. "Damage control. Damn right." Alvarez grinned. "But here's the kicker, the Justice Department just opened a civil rights investigation into the entire precinct." The old man felt his pulse jump. This was bigger than he'd imagined. All because an old man got hassled? Alvarez's smile faded. Because the system got caught. And now every cop who ever bullied a veteran or targeted the innocent is sweating bullets. The son checked his watch. Time to go. As they moved toward the SUV, the crowd erupted in applause. Someone shouted, "Thank you for your service." The old man acknowledged them with a small wave, his throat tight. This wasn't just about him anymore, it had become a rallying cry for every forgotten hero. The drive to police headquarters passed in silence. The old man watched the city wake up, shopkeepers unlocking doors, kids waiting for school buses, ordinary people going about their lives, unaware that today might change things for good. When they arrived, the scene took his breath away. Hundreds of people packed the plaza, many in veteran hats or holding flags. News helicopters circled overhead. A line of officers in dress uniforms stood at attention near the steps, their expressions unreadable. Alvarez whistled low. They rolled out the red carpet. The son's jaw tightened. No. They're trying to look cooperative before the axe falls. As they exited the vehicle, a murmur rippled through the crowd, then grew into cheers. Camera flashes popped like gunfire. The old man kept his head high, walking beside his son toward the building where a podium waited, flanked by the police chief and several grim-faced officials. The chief, a gray-haired man with shadows under his eyes, stepped forward to greet them. "Commander," he said stiffly, then turned to the old man. "Sir, on behalf of this department." The son cut him off with a raised hand. "Save it for the cameras, Chief. Let's get this over with." The old man hid a smile. His boy never did suffer fools gladly. They took their positions as microphones were adjusted. The chief began reading a prepared statement full of words like regret and reviewing procedures, but the crowd grew restless. Someone yelled, "We want the truth." Then, a disturbance at the back. The crowd parted as the two officers from that day were escorted through, both in street clothes, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. The younger one's face was a thundercloud of resentment. The old man felt his son tense beside him. Alvarez leaned in. "They're surrendering their badges. Just announced." The chief finished speaking and gestured to the son. "The floor is yours, Commander." The son stepped forward, and a hush fell. He didn't need notes. "Yesterday, my father asked me why this was happening." His voice carried across the plaza. "I told him it wasn't about him, it was about every person who's ever been treated as less than human by those sworn to protect them." He turned to the disgraced officers. "You thought you had power. But real power comes from honor. From decency." The crowd roared approval. The younger officer glared, but the taller one, the old man noticed, wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Then, the unexpected. The old man felt a hand on his arm. Alvarez whispered, "They want you to speak, sir. If you're ready." All eyes turned to him. The weight of the moment pressed down, 60 years of life, 30 of service, all leading to this. He adjusted his cap and stepped to the mic. "I'm just an old soldier," he began, his voice rougher than he'd like. "But I know this, the badge doesn't make the man. The heart does." He pointed to the veterans in the crowd. "We fought for the right to be treated fairly. Not as heroes. Just as men." A tear tracked down his weathered cheek. He didn't wipe it away. The silence that followed was more powerful than any applause. Even the chief looked moved. Then, from the back, a single voice began singing, "God Bless America." Others joined, until the plaza swelled with hundreds of voices united. The son put an arm around his father's shoulders as the two disgraced officers were led away. Justice, at last. But as the old man looked into the sea of faces, some angry, some hopeful, all watching, he knew this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The echoes of the crowd singing still hung in the air as the old man and his son stepped away from the podium. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but they moved through it all like a ship cutting through waves, steady, unshaken. Alvarez guided them toward a side entrance of the police headquarters, where a conference room had been set up away from the chaos. Inside, the air was cooler, quieter. The old man sank into a chair, suddenly feeling every one of his years. His hands trembled slightly again, not from fear, but from the weight of what had just happened. The police chief entered, followed by a man in a crisp suit who introduced himself as the city's mayor. The chief's earlier stiffness had softened into something resembling respect. "Commander," the chief began, "your father, both of you, handled that with more grace than we deserved." The son didn't respond immediately. He studied the chief, then the mayor, his gaze unreadable. "Grace isn't the point. Change is." The mayor nodded vigorously. "And we are changing. Effective immediately, we're implementing mandatory de-escalation training for all officers. We're also establishing a civilian review board with veteran representation." The old man listened, sipping from a water bottle someone had handed him. Promises. He'd heard plenty of those in his time. What mattered was what happened after the cameras left. Alvarez, ever the lawyer, had her laptop open, typing notes. "We'll need that in writing. With specific timelines." The mayor opened his mouth to respond, but a commotion outside the door cut him off. Raised voices. Then the door burst open. The younger officer, the one who had harassed the old man, stood there, face flushed, his police escort trying to restrain him. "This is bullshit," he spat. "You're letting them humiliate us? After everything we've done for this city?" The room froze. The old man set down his water bottle and stood. He didn't speak right away. Just looked at the officer, really looked. Past the anger, past the uniform. What he saw was a young man who'd never been taught the difference between power and honor. "You're right," the old man said quietly. The officer blinked, thrown. "What? You have done things for this city. I don't doubt that." The old man took a step closer. "But that's not the point, son. The point is, when you put on that badge, you don't get to pick and choose who deserves respect. It comes with the job. Or it should." The officer's jaw worked, but no words came out. The fight seemed to drain from him, replaced by something more complicated. Shame? Confusion? The chief stepped in. "That's enough. Get him out of here." As the officer was led away, the old man caught a glimpse of the taller officer, the one who had hesitated that day on the street. He was standing in the hallway, watching. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, the old man thought he saw something flicker there. Regret, maybe. Or understanding. The mayor cleared his throat. "As I was saying." The son's phone buzzed. He checked it, then showed the screen to Alvarez. Her eyebrows shot up. The old man glanced at his son. "Problem?" The younger man pocketed his phone. Not for us. The Justice Department just subpoenaed 5 years' worth of disciplinary records from this precinct. He looked at the chief. Seems we're not the only ones who've had issues. The chief paled. Alvarez snapped her laptop shut. I think we're done here. Outside, the crowd was beginning to disperse, but a small group of veterans remained, standing at attention. As the old man and his son emerged, the veteran saluted, not the son, the commander, but the old man himself. He returned the salute, his chest tight. The drive home was quiet. The old man stared out the window, watching the city pass by. So much had changed in just 2 days. And yet, in some ways, nothing had. Back at the house, the news vans were gone. The street was empty, peaceful. The way it had been before all this started. The son helped his father up the porch steps. You okay? The old man nodded. Just tired. Inside, he sank into his favorite chair with a groan. The adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. His son disappeared into the kitchen and returned with 2 beers. They drank in comfortable silence for a while. Then the old man spoke. You think any of it will stick? The changes they promised? The son took a long pull from his bottle. Some of it. Not all. But it's a start. The old man nodded. Starts were something. His phone buzzed, a text from one of his buddies at the VFW. The message was simple, proud of you, brother. He smiled, showing it to his son. The younger man grinned. Better get ready. You're probably gonna be busier than me now. Interviews. Speeches. Maybe a book deal. The old man snorted. Not a chance. I've said my piece. The son studied him for a moment, then nodded. He understood. Some fights you took on because you had to, not because you wanted the spotlight. They finished their beers as the sun set, casting golden light through the windows. The old man realized something then. This wasn't just about justice or change. It was about a son standing up for his father. And a father remembering what it felt like to stand tall again. The old man woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, real sunlight, not the harsh glare of camera lights. For the first time in days, the house felt normal again. He found his son in the kitchen, flipping pancakes with one hand while scrolling through his phone with the other. The table was already set, 2 plates, orange juice, even the old man's favorite maple syrup pulled from the back of the cupboard. Since when do you cook? The old man grumbled, sliding into his chair. The son smirked. Since I realized your idea of breakfast is black coffee and stubbornness. He slid a stack of pancakes onto the old man's plate. Eat. Your skin and bones. They ate in comfortable silence, the only sound the clink of forks and the distant chirping of birds outside. No reporters. No lawyers. Just a father and son sharing a meal. The old man watched his son over the rim of his coffee cup. The younger man looked tired, deep shadows under his eyes, a new tightness around his mouth. The past few days had taken their toll on both of them. You heading back today? The old man asked, already knowing the answer. The son nodded. Duty calls. He hesitated, then added, you could come with me. Stay at my place for a while. Until things die down. The old man snorted. And let those vultures think I'm running? Not a chance. He softened the words with a small smile. Besides, who'd keep an eye on the neighborhood? The son didn't push. He knew better. After breakfast, they took their coffee onto the porch. The street was quiet, just Mrs. Henderson walking her poodle, old Mr. Thompson fetching his newspaper. Normal life, moving on. The son pulled an envelope from his jacket and handed it over. Before I forget. The old man opened it, official letterhead from the police department. An apology, signed by the chief. And beneath it, a notice that both officers had been terminated. "Huh," the old man said, folding the letter back up. "Guess that's that." But the son shook his head. "Not quite." He pulled out his phone, pulled up a news article, and handed it over. The headline read, "Fired officers file lawsuit claiming wrongful termination." The old man sighed. "Should have seen that coming." The son took his phone back. "Doesn't matter. They're done." The whole country saw the footage. No jury in the world would side with them. A car pulled up, a sleek black sedan with government plates. The son's ride. They stood, the old man bracing himself against the porch railing. His knees ached more today. Probably the weather changing. The son grabbed his duffel bag, then paused. For a moment, he just looked at his father, really looked. The old man saw something in his eyes he hadn't seen since the boy was small. Uncertainty. "You sure you'll be okay?" The old man reached out, gripping his son's shoulder. "I survived worse than a couple of punk cops." The younger man smiled, a real smile, not the tight-lipped one he'd been wearing for days. "Yeah. You did." They hugged, quick but firm. No tears. No dramatic speeches. Just two soldiers parting ways. As the car pulled away, the old man stayed on the porch, watching until it turned the corner and disappeared. Inside, the house was too quiet. He wandered into the living room, his eyes landing on the photos lining the walls, his son's graduation from boot camp, their fishing trip up north, that time they'd rebuilt the porch together. A lifetime of memories. The phone rang. He considered ignoring it, probably another reporter, but something made him pick up. "Hello? Hey, Sarge." A gruff voice, Charlie, his old army buddy. "Just saw the news. You're a damn celebrity." The old man chuckled. Yeah. Charlie's tone turned serious. "You know you started something, right? Vets all over are sharing their stories now. That hashtag's everywhere." "What hashtag?" "Hashtag walking while old. It's gone viral." The old man had to sit down. He just wanted to take his damn walk. Now he was some kind of symbol. Charlie kept talking, but the old man barely heard him. His eyes landed on the morning paper still folded on the coffee table. The headline jumped out at him, "Local Veterans Ordeal Sparks National Conversation About Policing." He set the phone down, gently, and walked to the window. Kids were playing in the street. A mail truck rolled by. Normal life. But something had changed. Not just for him. For everyone. The phone rang again. And again. He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed his cap and stepped outside. The sun was warm on his face. The sidewalk stretched before him, smooth and inviting. He took a deep breath. And went for his walk.